Hello, from wherever you're joining me, Chodesh Tov, and going through the Sanhedrin Daf Common Edition. Anyone who's not seen this edition, it's very good. It's got footnotes at the side. It's got Hebrew and English, and English broken down into individual bite-sized chunks, so it's easy to read. And it also has the full Gemara at the back in Aramaic. So let's dive straight in. Moshe, and the children of Israel did as the Lord commanded Moses. The Gemara asks, if that is so, what did they do with the words in the verse? And they stoned him with a stone. These words appear to be superfluous, as even without them we would know that God's instructions to stone the blasphemer were implemented. What then did they serve to teach? The Gemara answers, that phrase is necessary for that which is taught in a Braita. The verse states, and they stoned him with a stone. When the condemned man is stoned to death, he is stoned while naked. If he dies from the first stone that's cast upon him, the force fulfills his obligation, and that's from the Rambam in Sefer Shoftim Hilchos Sanhedrin 15:1. The word him teaches that they stoned him alone while he was naked. Let me just the camera a little bit. There we go. But not while he was in his clothing. The verse uses the singleton stone oven rather than the pluratum stones avonim to teach that if the condemned man died after being struck with one stone, the court has fulfilled its obligation. The Gemara knows. And it was necessary to write with regard to the blasphemer that they stoned him with a stone, in the singular. Necessary to write with regard to the man who gathered sticks on Shabbat that they stoned him with stones. Numbers 15:36 in the plural. And had the merciful one written only stone, I would say that where the condemned man did not die after being struck with one stone, they do not bring other stones and kill him with them. Therefore the merciful one writes stones. And had the merciful one written only stones, I would say that from the outset they should bring two or more stones. Therefore the merciful one writes stone. So it's covering all scenarios basically. The Gemara raises an objection to Rav Papa's derivation. This time the Bible cited above said, it is stated here, and it is stated elsewhere, thereby basing his derivation on a verbal analogy between the two verses, and gives a verbal analogy, and concerning the blasphemer and the verse concerning the broader sin offerings that are burned. How then can Rav Papa and the Gemara disagree and derive the halacha directly from the verse with the blasphemer? The Gemara answers, according to Rav Papa, the Tana of the Baisa said, had it not been stated, now this is what he's saying, had the verse not been stated from which it can be directly derived that the condemned man is stoned outside all three camps, I would have said that this can be learned by way of a verbal analogy. But now, until the verse has been stated, that verbal analogy is not needed. So you take it straight from the verse, you don't need a verbal analogy. This may be understood in light of what the Ran writes in Tract in the Dome regarding halachot that could have been derived by way of a verbal analogy. Now the verse sometimes states them explicitly. This answer resolves not only the difficulty raised against Rav Papa, but also the difficulty that could have been raised against Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi said, Moshe Hechava Yasev, the location of the place of stoning can be directly derived from the verse stating the discussion of blasphemy, but in a slightly different manner. Where was Moses sitting when the mat of the blasphemer was brought to him? In the Levite camp. And the merciful one said to him, take him out who was cursed, in Leviticus 24:14, indicating that he'd be taken outside the Levite camp, into the Israelite camp. And God continued in that verse, outside the camp, which is an additional command that he should be removed even further outside the Israelite camp. And the latter verse which states, they brought him that had cursed out of the camp, and children of Israel did as the Lord commanded Moses in Leviticus 24:23 teaches us about the implementation of God's instruction, i.e. that the children of Israel did in fact carry out his command. And the Gemara raises an objection. The implementation of God's instruction is written explicitly in this context, as stated in the continuation of the verse, and the children of Israel did as the Lord commanded Moses. The Gemara answers, that verse is necessary to teach us that not only was the condemned man taken outside the three camps and stoned, but the rest of God's instructions were fulfilled. These instructions relate to the placing of the witness's hands upon the head of the condemned man, as is stated, And let all that heard him place their hands upon his head, Leviticus 24:14, until the witnesses pushing of the condemned man from a platform the height of 2 stories. The sage said to Rav Ashi, according to you, that the expression take out by itself means outside the camp, and outside the camp means outside an additional camp. What did you learn from all those instances of takeout? Kol hanehosi madarsha bahu. It has been suggested in resolution to this difficulty that only in the case of the blasphemer are the words takeout significant, and the verse could have been formulated differently, but in contrast, the instance of takeout written with regard to the bulls brought as sin offerings are not superfluous, and therefore teach no halacha, as those verses could have been written in any other way. Could not have been written any other way, and that's in the Hammer Vayhi. They are written with regard to bulls brought sin offerings that are burned. According to your explanation, there are many superfluous phrases in the verses. The Gemara comments, indeed, this is difficult with regard to the opinion of Rav Ashi. The Mishnah teaches that one man stands at the entrance of the court with cloth in his hand, ready to sing to the court agents leading the condemned man to his execution, and that some doubt has been raised with regard to the latter's guilt. Rav Huna says, it's obvious to me that the stone with which the condemned man is stoned, Even Shenis Kalba, all items needed for the condemned execution, e.g. the stone with which he is stoned, a tree upon which his corpse is hung after his death, and the like, are posted with public fund, as the Rambam say for Shoftim, Sanhedrin 13:3, and the tree on which his corpse is hung after his execution, or the cord with which he is killed, or the scarf with which he is strangled, all of these come from the property of the community. What is the reason for this? We do not tell the condemned man to go and bring these items from his own property and effectively kill himself. I'm going to raise a dilemma. With regard to the cloth that is waved, and the horse that races off after the court agents stop the latter from carrying out the execution, from whose property do they come? Of that of the condemned man or that of the community? The Gemara explained the 2 sides of the dilemma. Since they are needed to save the man being led to his execution, these items should be taken from his property. But since the court is obligated to take all measures to save him from death, they should be taken from them, either community. And furthermore, another question is raised along similar lines. With regard to that which Rav here, but Ashi says, or Rav Hissa says, the court gives one who is being led out to be killed a grain, koret of frankincense. What's a koret? Koret, grain. This word is close to the Arabic root karata, meaning to cut something into small pieces. A koret is a very small piece of crumb or drop of frankincense. After the condemned man has confessed, he's given a grain of frankincense and a cup of wine in order to confuse his mind. Remember, say for Sanhedrin 13:2. Talk about frankincense. Lavona. Frankincense is a resin produced by the frankincense tree in the genus of Boswellia. Several varieties of frankincense grow wild in deserts and in crevices and rocks in southern Arabia, East Africa, India, Malaysia. The Arabian variety is a woody bush with 3-lobed leaves. And the trunk is slashed and thick, white and fragrant sap issues. The sap is an important ingredient in the production of incense. And a cup of wine, not to confuse his mind and thereby minimize his suffering from the fear of impending death, as a state to give strong drink to him that is ready to perish, and wine to the bitter in soul. Proverbs 31:6. And this taught by the most prominent women of Jerusalem would donate this drink and bring it to those being led out to be killed. The question is, if these prominent women did not donate this drink, from whom is it taken? And the Gemara answers, with regard to this question, it is certainly reasonable that this drink should be taken from the community. Misha Sibur, whatever is needed in connection with the execution, not just those items that are used in the actual execution, including the grain of frankincense, the horse, and the cloth, all paid for with public funds. If one wishes to donate those items, then he may do so. I'm going to say for Shoftim, Sanhedrin 13:3 in the Lechem Mishnah there. As it is written, give, tenu, strong drink in the plural, indicating that it should come from them, the community. If one of the students sitting before the judges said, I can teach a reason to acquit him, and he became mute and cannot explain himself, what is the halacha? Some understand that were the court to pay attention to his words, they would acquit the defendant, as had this student not become mute, he might have put forward a claim that would have convinced the court of the defendant's innocence. Rashi and Naran, others say that they would postpone the trial until the student regains his faculty of speech, and they present his claim before the court, says Ramah. In such a case, does the court take heed of his words, or do they disregard him? Rav Sheshet waved his hands. Some explain that he waved his hand to create a breeze, thereby indicating that Rav Ahaba's words were mere wind, lacking substance. Rambam and Rashi in scorn said, if the student became mute, the court certainly does not pay attention to him, as were the court to concern themselves with what he said. They would have to be concerned even that perhaps there is someone at the end of the world who can propose an argument in the condemned man's favor. The Gemara rejects this argument. The cases are not similar. There no one said that he had a reason to acquit the condemned man. Here the student already said that he had a reason to acquit the condemned man. The question is therefore appropriate. What is halacha in such a case? The Gemara suggests, come and hear an answer. As Rabbi Yossi Bar Hanina says, in a case where one of the students who argued to acquit the defendant and then died, so this is where the student and they died. If one of the judges or students argued in favor of acquitting the defendant and then died, he's regarded as though he's still alive, and the court counts his vote among those favoring acquittal. If he said only that he wished to propose a reason to acquit, but failed to do so before he died, his statement is disregarded. So if he wished to propose the reason, but if he'd actually given the reason after he died, it still stands. In accordance with the opinion of Rav Sheshet, Rambam Sefer Shovtim Hilchot Sanhedrin 10:3, and the Lechem Mishnah there, the court views him as if he were alive and standing in his place and voting to acquit the defendant. Indicating that if he argued to acquit the defendant and explained his reasoning, yes, the court counts his vote as if he was still alive. But if he did not actually argue to acquit the defendant, but only said that he wished to propose such an argument, his vote is not counted as though he was still alive. The Gemara rejects this proof. If the student argued to acquit the defendant, it's obvious to me that it should be counted among those favoring acquittal. But if he only says that he wishes to propose such an argument, then the lemma be raised whether or not he should be regarded as having presented a convincing argument in favor of acquittal. The question is left unresolved. The Mishnah teaches that even if the condemned himself says, I can teach a reason to acquit myself, he is returned to the courthouse even 4 or 5 times, provided that there is substance to his words. The Gemara asks, and if the halacha then there must be substance in his word, even first and second time that the condemned man says that he can teach a reason to acquit himself. But isn't it taught about the first and second times that he says that he can teach a reason to acquit himself? They return to the court and consider whether there is substance to his statement or there is no substance. So it's saying that if the Gemara and the Mishnah is saying that he can keep coming back even if he don't have his in order for him to come back 4 or 5 times, he must have substance to his reason to acquit himself. But there's a brayta that says the first and second time when he comes back, they assess whether there's substance. So which is it? If one has been taken out for the execution and he says that he has a reason he should be acquitted, the first and second times he states this, he's returned to the court. After he has been returned for a second time, the court sends out again him out again with a pair of rabbis. If he says once again that he has a reason he should be acquitted, the rabbi assess his argument. If they find that the claim has substance, he's returned to court even several times. Ram Sefer Shovtim Hilchot Sanhedrin 13:1. From this point forward, that if there's substance to his statement, they return to the court. If there's no substance, they do not return. This appears to contradict the Mishnah. Exactly. Rav Papa says, explain that the Mishnah's ruling applies only from the second time forward. That from that point on, we examine whether there's substance to his words. So for the first 2 times, it didn't have the substance. They returned, they assessed whether the substance, and from the second time on, it must have substance for him to be returned to the courthouse and then to assess the claim. The Gemara asked, how do we know whether or not there is substance to his words? Abai said, if the condemned man has already been returned twice to the courthouse, we send a second pair of rabbis with him to evaluate his claim. If they find there is substance to his claim, yes, he's returned once again to the courthouse. If not, he is not returned. The Gemara asks, but why not send a pair of rabbis with him from the outset, even the first time, and have them make an initial assessment of his claim? The Gemara answers, since a man facing execution is frightened by the thought of his impending death, he will not be able to say all that he has to say, and perhaps out of fear he will be confused and not provide a substantial reason to overturn his verdict. Therefore, the first time he returned to the courthouse without initial examination of his arguments. Once he has already been returned on 2 occasions, the court allows for no further delay, and they send 2 rabbis to evaluate his claim before him returning a 3rd time. The Mishnah. If after the condemned man is returned to the courthouse, the judge finds a reason to acquit him, they acquit him and release him immediately. But if they do not find a reason to acquit him, he goes out to be stoned, and the crier goes out before him. When one has been taken up for execution, a crier goes out before him and proclaims that so-and-so, son of so-and-so, has been laid to execution because he committed such and such a transgression in such and such a place at such and such a time. And these are the names of the witnesses who testified against him. And he invites anyone who knows of a claim in his favor, or anyone who can render the witnesses, conspiring witnesses, to come forward and do so. According to the Mishnah and the opinion of Abaye, one must say, for Shoftim Hilchas Sanhedrin 13:1, and publicly proclaim so-and-so, son of so-and-so, is going out to be stoned because he's committed such and such a transgression, and so-and-so and so-and-so as witnesses. And who knows of a reason to acquit him shall come forward and teach it on his behalf. Abai says, a crier must also publicly proclaim that the transgression was committed on such and such day, at such and such an hour, and such a place, as perhaps there are those who know that the witnesses could not have been in that place at that time, and they would come forward to render the witnesses conspiring witnesses. The Mishnah teaches that a crier goes out before the condemned man. This indicates that not only before him, while he's being led out to execution, that yes, the crier goes out, but from the outset, before the accused is convicted, he does not go out. The Gemara is a difficulty, but isn't it taught about on Passover Eve they hung the corpse of Jesus the Nazarene? Yeshu HaNotri, Jesus the Nazarene. Although the Gemara discussing the killing of Jesus makes reference to Jesus the Nazarene, it must be noted that the Talmud elsewhere in Sotas 47a also makes reference to a heretic of by that same name. And from the historical context of that passage, it is clear that it is not referring to Jesus, the founder of Christianity. In fact, some versions of the text here do not contain the words of Nazarene. Nevertheless, an incident recounted here resulted in the persecution of Jews throughout history. It was often subject to censorship and was not found in most published edition of the Talmud. That's interesting. Yeah. After they killed him by way of stoning. And a cry went out before him 48, publicly proclaiming Jesus the Nazarene is going out to be stoned because he practiced sorcery, incited people to idol worship, and led the Jewish people astray. Anyone who has reason to acquit him shall come forward and teach on his behalf. And the court did not find a reason to acquit him, so they stoned him and hung his corpse up on Passover Eve. Allah said, and how do you understand this proof? Was Jesus the Nazarene worthy of conducting a search for a reason to acquit him? He was an inciter to idol worship, and the verse 1 states, with regard to an inciter to idol worship, neither shall you spare, neither shall you conceal him. Deuteronomy 39. Rather, Jesus was different, as he had close ties with the government. Some explain that Jesus had connection with the members of the Hasmonean dynasty and therefore were reluctant to convict him. And the Gentiles tried to interested in his acquittal. Consequently, the court gave him every opportunity to clear himself so that it could not be claimed that he was falsely convicted. Apropos the trial of Jesus, the Gemara cites another Braita where the sages taught Jesus another one had 5 disciples. Talmidei Yeshu. All of the Talmudic passages that mention Jesus contain elements that are not found in other sources that mention him. Among the disciples of Jesus mentioned here, other sources also mention Matthew, the author of one of the Gospels, or Theodothidis. This discussion should be understood as a polemic against heretics, including the disciples of Jesus who claim that the Bible alludes to the fact that they should not be executed by the sages. In order to counter such claims, the sages brought similar allusions from verses that they should be executed. Matai, Naki, Nezer, Buni, and Toda. They brought Matai in to stand trial. Matai said to the judges, "Shall Matai be executed? But isn't it written, when Matai shall I come and appear before God?" In Psalms 42:3, Matai claimed that this verse alludes to the fact that he is righteous. They said to him, "Yes, Matai shall be executed, as it is written, when Matai shall die and his name perish." In Psalms 41:6. They brought Nakai in to stand trial. Nakai said to the judges, "Shall Nakai be executed? But it is written, and the innocent Nakai and the righteous you shall not slay." In Exodus 23:7, they said to him, "Yes, Nakai shall be executed, as it is written, in secret places he kills the innocent Naki. Psalms 10:8. They brought Netzer in to stand trial. He said to the judges, "Shall Netzer be executed? Isn't it written, and the branch Netzer shall go out to its roots?" Isaiah 11:1. They said to him, "Yes, Netzer shall be executed, but it is written, but you are cast out of your grave like an abhorred branch, Netzer." Isaiah 14:9. Then they brought Buni in to stand trial. Buni said to the judges, "Shall Buni be executed? But it is written, my firstborn son Buni is Israel." Exodus 4:22. They said to him, "Yes, Buni shall be executed, as it is written, behold, I shall kill your firstborn son, Bincha." Exodus 4:3. Then they brought Toda into stand trial. Toda said to the judges, "Shall Toda be executed?" And written a psalm of thanksgiving, Toda in Psalms 101. They said to him, "Yes, Toda shall be executed, as it is written, whoever slaughters a thanksgiving offering honors me." In Psalms 50:23, a probe of the last verse cited in Inspired by Yeshua ben Levi says, "With regard to anyone who slaughters the evil inclination after it has tempted him to sin, if he repents and confesses his sin, the verse ascribes him credit, as though he honored the Holy and Blessed in two worlds. The connection between confession and honoring God in this world and the world to come may be understood as follows. One who confesses sin acknowledges that God is the creator and master of this world, and he also confirms the existence of reward and punishment in the world to come. Therefore, he has honored God in two worlds, Me'iri Hamavaihi, this world and the world to come. As it is written, whoever slaughters a thanksgiving offering Torah honors me. Yeghabdani, Psalms 50:23, which can also be read as, whoever slaughters evil inclination and confesses, mitvada honors me. And these two instances of the latter none in the word Yehab allude to the two words. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi also says, when the temple is standing, if a person sacrifices a burnt offering, he has a reward given for the bringing a burnt offering, and if he sacrifices a meal offering, he has a reward given for bringing a meal offering. But as for one whose spirit is humble, the verse ascribes him credit for his prayer, as though he has sacrificed all the offerings. As it is stated, the offerings of God are a broken spirit in Psalms 51:19, which teaches that a broken spirit is equivalent to all the offerings to God in the plural. And moreover, his prayer is not rejected, as is stating in the continuation of that verse, the broken and the contrite heart, God, you will not despair. The Mishnah. When the condemned man is at a distance of about 10 cubits from the place of stoning, they would not wait until the condemned man reaches the place of stoning, because he might be too frightened to confess there. Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah. The frankincense and the wine that the condemned man was given to calm his nerves were apparently administered in confession, so that his confession would be stated with full awareness. They say to him, confess. Amulo his vade. When the condemned man is at a distance of about 10 cubits from the place of stoning, those caught him tell him to confess. As a custom for those being executed to confess, anyone who confesses has a portion in the world to come. If the condemned man does not know how to confess, they teach him to say, "Let my death be an atonement for all my sins." The Rambam say, for Shoftim Hilchot Sanhedrin 13:1, as the way of all those being executed is to confess. Shekain derech kol ha-mumasin. The Tiferet Yisrael understands these words as a continuation of what was said to the condemned man. He was told that this is the way of all who are executed to confess their sins, since they no longer have anything to lose in this world by confessing. And confessing can only bring them reward in the world to come. As whoever confesses and regrets his transgressions has a portion in the world to come. So we find with regard to Achan that Joshua said to him, "My son, please give glory to the Lord God of Israel and make confession to him." Joshua 7:19. And the next verse states, "And Achan answered Joshua and said, Indeed I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and like this and like that have I done." And from where is it derived that Achan confession to return from? It is derived from here, as stated, and Joshua said, "Why have you brought trouble unto us?" Onwards, "The Lord shall trouble you this day." In Joshua 7:25, Joshua said to Achan as follows, "On this day of your judgment you are troubled, but you will not be troubled in the world to come." And if the condemned man does not know how to confess, either from ignorance or out of confusion, they say to him, "Say simply that my death be atonement for my sins." Rabbi Yehuda says, if the condemned man knows that he was convicted by testimony of conspiring witnesses, im hayadeshahu muzuman, even if the condemned man knows that the witnesses have testified falsely against him, he should not deviate from the standard confession form in contrast to the minority opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Sefer from Hilchos Sanhedrin 13:1. But in fact, he's innocent. He says, "Let my death be an atonement for all my sins except for this sin." The sages who disagreed with Rabbi Yehuda said to him, "If so, every person who has been executed will say that to clear himself in the eyes of the public. Therefore, the condemned does not make such a statement on his own. The court does not suggest it to him as an alternative. Since the Mishnah refers to Achan's sin, the Gemara cites several statements concerning that incident. The sages taught in a bride, Joshua said to Achan, "Please now give glory to the Lord God of Israel and make confession to him." The word "na" is nothing other than an expression of supplication, or just an expression of supplication when approaching Achan. The Bride explained, when the Holy and Blessed be He said to Joshua, "Israel has sinned," Joshua 7:11, Joshua said to him, "Master of the universe, who is the one who has sinned?" God said to him, "Am I an informer?" Delator. From the Latin delator, meaning informer or denouncer. "Go cast lots and find out for yourself." Joshua then went and cast lots, and lot fell upon Achan. Achan said to him, "Joshua, do you come to execute me merely based on a lot, without any corroborating evidence? You and Elazar the priest are the two most distinguished leaders of the generation, but if I cast a lot upon the two of you, your brothers fall upon one of you. What can you prove from a lot?" Joshua said to him, "I ask of you, do not spread slander about the lots. As Eretz Yisrael will one day be divided by lot, as is stated, nevertheless the land shall be divided by lot." In Numbers 26:55, due to you, the result of that lottery may be challenged. Therefore, Joshua used the word "na," pleading with Achan to confess. Joshua said to Achan, "Please give glory to the Lord God of Israel and make confession to him." Ravina says, Joshua wondered Achan with his words, saying, "Do not ask anything of you but confession." Do not ask anything but confession, make confession to him and be discharged. Although Achan mistakenly understood that he'd be freed if he confessed, what Joshua in fact meant was that by confessing, Achan would achieve atonement and free himself from the punishment in the world to come. Hamabai here in the Ivis. In the Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah, it says that Achan's execution was an extra legal punishment necessitated by unusually pressing circumstances. According to Halacha, one cannot be executed based on his own confession or have his guilt determined by a lottery. Thinking that if he confessed, he would be pardoned, Achan immediately responded, and Achan answered Joshua and said, "Indeed, I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and like this and like that I have done." Joshua 7:20. With regard to the words "and like this and like that I have done," Rabbi Ashi says, Rabbi Hanina says, this teaches that Achan misused consecrated property from 3 dedications. 3 groups of property that had been dedicated to the Lord. 2 were during wars waged in the days of Moses, and 1 was in the days of Joshua. As is stated, "and like this and like that I have done," indicating that he already committed 2 similar offences before committing the offence in Jericho. Rabbi Yochanan says, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, Achan misused property from 5 dedications. Shelosha Chamarim Chamisha. In the Jerusalem Talmud and the Midrash, these dedications are spelled out. They are the dedication and spoiled from the battle of Amalek, from the battle against the king of Arad, from the battle involving Sichon, from the battle involving Og, and from the battle involving Midian. 4 during wage wars in the days of Moses, the one in the days of Joshua of this day, and I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and like this and like that I have done it with each, and allude to an additional prior offense. The Gemara asks, if so, what is the reason that the Jewish people were not punished on Achan until now? Rabbi Yochanan says the name of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, because God did not punish the nation as a whole for hidden sins committed by individuals until the Jewish people crossed the Jordan River. Lefi shelo anas al hanithtaros ad she'avdu Yisrael. The Tefana Paneach suggests that the principle that all Jewish people are responsible for one another is based on the fact that they consider a single entity and not a collection of individuals. They were considered a single entity only after they established a permanent home in Eretz Yisrael under the leadership of a single unifying ruler. Therefore, they were not punished for each other's sins before they crossed the Jordan River and entered the land. The Gemara knows that this subject to a dispute between the Tanaim. The verse states, the hidden matters belong to the Lord our God, but those matters are revealed. Hanishtaras haniglos. Rabbeinu Tam and the Ramah understand the verse as follows: both for the hidden matters that are known only to God and for the revealed matters that are known also to us, all the Jewish people are responsible and held accountable for one another. The dots over the words indicate that Jewish people are not always held responsible for one another in regard to both hidden and revealed matters that begin only once they cross the Jordan. The dot over the letter Ayin, which has a numerical value of 70, teaches that this mutual responsibility began only 70 days after the verse was stated, in accordance with the calculation found in the Mechalta. Moses said that these words before he died, 70 days before the Jewish people crossed the Jordan River and Tosfos Harosh, belong to us, to the Feva ad Olam, that we may do all the words of this Torah, Deuteronomy 29:28. Why in the Torah scroll are there dots? Nukad, dots. The marks appearing over certain letters and words in the Torah scroll serve as a sign of uncertainty with regard to the letters or words. See Avad the Rabbi Nathan 34. For this reason, the words of which these dots appear are generally interpreted so as to restrict the halachic implications as much as possible. And they give an example verse here from Deuteronomy 29:28. Over each letters to us and to our children. Over that ayin in the words forever and. The dots, which function like erasers that weaken the force of the words, teach that God did not punish the nation for hidden sins until the Jewish people crossed the Jordan River. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Nehemiah said to him, and does God ever punish the nation as a whole for hidden sins committed by individuals? But isn't it already stated the hidden masses belong to the Lord our God forever? In the case that the Jewish people will never be collectively held responsible for the secret sins of individuals, rather the dots over the words teach that just as God did not ever punish the nation as a whole for hidden sins committed by individuals, so too he did not punish the entire nation for sins committed publicly by individuals until the Jewish people crossed the Jordan River. The Gemara asks, but if so, what is the reason? This is just going the first two sentences of the next daf. When reading that in the case of Achan they were punished, the Gemara answers Achan's offense was not a hidden matter because his wife and children knew about it and they did not protest. This follows the rule that a matter known to three people is considered public knowledge. As Meiri, I hope this made sense. If you have any comments, questions, discussion points, please feel free to raise them with me. I wish you a very good day, Chodesh Tov, and all the best. Bye.